Hi guys, welcome to the IELTS multi-step program. My name is Lanre and I'll be your tutor for today. Today, I'm going to be taking you through the specific tips and strategies that you need to move your band from a band 6 to an instant band 9. The first tip is the most important one, so you need to watch this video till the end. What do you do when you hear you have an IELTS test? The speaking test usually comes before any other part of the test. So you do speaking first before you write your listening, reading, and writing paper, which makes the speaking test a little bit more important than every other part of the test. How do you prepare for this test? How do you answer the questions in the first part of the test? How do you avoid the pitfalls that people usually fall into when taking the speaking test? All these are the things that we will be going through today, and I will be taking you through a journey of success. Preparing for the test is as easy as taking a deep breath. When you take a deep breath, you gather all your thoughts into one place, and it's easier for you to bring them out and express them as clearly and as cleanly as possible. Another psychological tip that you can use to prepare for the test is to watch a lot of videos. Watch a lot of videos, watch a lot of news items that talk about different areas of using English language. All this will set you up for a wider vocabulary range and also a wider knowledge range for you to respond to the questions that will be asked. The third and most important tip for preparing psychologically is to put a smile on your face when you meet the examiner. The first impression that you give to the examiner when you step into the room for your speaking test matters a lot. If you're nervous from the beginning, chances are that you will definitely be nervous throughout the rest of the test. If you come into the test with these high expectations, with a high pitch of your voice, chances are that throughout the 15 minutes duration of the test, you might not be able to sustain that particular pitch that you started with. Get into the exam hall, greet the examiner. If it's morning time, a good morning will do. If it's afternoon or if it's evening, whatever time of the day, the appropriate greeting for that time of the day would suffice. The first mistake most candidates make is this. When you're greeting the examiner, you should say, "Good morning, Elizabeth." Or if you know the surname of the examiner, you could say, "Good morning, Miss Smith." Now, the first mistake that you are going to make as an English speaker is to say, "Good morning, Miss Elizabeth." A native English speaker would never use the title Miss, Mr. or Mrs. with the first name. The title is often used with the surname. The second tip that you need to be very, very careful about is introducing yourself. This part is usually a very big pitfall that a lot of people make mistakes about. When you're introducing yourself to the examiner in the speaking part 1, what you need to do is to be cognizant of the peculiar pitfalls that most candidates make. The first pitfall that you are most likely to fall into in the speaking part 1 of the IELTS test is introducing yourself. The examiner asks you the question, "How may I address you?" or "What may I call you?" Now, most people find this very confusing, and the confusion comes from the word address. Most people think that the word address there refers to their physical location, but it doesn't. The word address simply means, how should I call you, or what should I call you? Most times, it's easier to give your name or the name that you use in natural conversation, maybe with your friends or with your colleagues at work. For example, when I introduced myself, I said my name is Lanre. During the test, if the examiner asked me the question, "How may I address you?" I could just say, "Please call me Lanre," and that solves that part. The second thing that you need to be very careful about when you're answering questions, introducing yourself, is to say your name as slowly as possible. Why is this important? The examiner is most times a native speaker of the language, that is English language. And most times they do not understand the native tongue of you who are taking the test. So most times when they ask you a question, please say your name and you rush through it, Olanrewaju. The examiner has a challenge hearing that, processing it, and also repeating that name. So you should take your time to say your name as slowly as possible. The third pitfall that most candidates fall into when they're introducing themselves is not to use contractions. I'll explain this. A contraction is when you use two words in English language. Most times you have not or is, and it is merged with the word before it. A classic example will be, my name is Lanre. Please do not say this in the exam. If you do this, obviously what it shows to the examiner is that you do not have a high competence in pronunciation. To show that you're really competent in pronouncing English words, you should use contractions as much as possible. You should say, my name's Lanre, or I'm Lanre. Do not say, I am Lanre, or do not say, my name is Lanre. The third tip that you need to be very careful about when you are introducing yourself in the speaking part of the IELTS is this. Most times the examiners usually set a trap for candidates when they are introducing themselves. So they ask you a question and they say, where are you from? Now, this is not the point for you to tell a story or to expand your answer. Most times, this point is where you need to give a specific detail about where you're from. My name's Lanre. I'm from Lagos, Nigeria. This is not the time for you to elaborate on what is peculiar about Lagos or what is special about Nigeria. There will be time for this later on in the test, so you need to watch out for this. The second tip that we'll be dealing with today would be the because question. I'll repeat, the because question. Every question in the speaking part 1 of the IELTS test is a because question. This might throw up a red flag when people wonder why a because question. In the IELTS, the questions that will be asked in the part 1 of the speaking test are questions that will ask you for your preference or for your personal experience. Most times when these questions are asked, you need to give a reason for the experience you've had or for the preference that you've chosen so that you would show the examiner that you are clearly understanding what the examiner is saying. Another reason why you need to answer a because question is that it effectively closes the communication loop for that question. An example of a because question is this. Do you like cooking? The average test taker would say yes. Someone who is marginally better than that level would say, yes, I do. No, I do not. Now, in natural conversation, this can be said to be a good response. But for the purpose of the IELTS, this would not suffice for you to get the desired score of a band 9 or a band 8. What you should say is this. Do you like cooking? Yes, I like cooking because my mother taught me how to cook from age 3. What this does is this. It already anticipates the prompt that the examiner would give after I answer that question. When the examiner asks me if I like cooking and I say yes, the next thing logically that the examiner would ask is why. So you should be able to preempt this question and give a response that would effectively answer that question and close that communication loop. I'll take that again. Do you like cooking? Yes, I like cooking because when I was younger, my mother taught me how to cook from age 3. The challenge that this raises is this. You do not want to respond to every question in your part 1 with because, and because it will become repetitive, monotonous, and you will lose marks for vocabulary. What you want to do is to find other phrases or other words that you can use to express reason when answering your questions. Phrases like due to, words like so, phrases like as a result of. These phrases will also help you to express reason effectively without using the word because. Do you like cooking? Yes, I like cooking due to the fact that when I was younger, my father threw me in a pot of burning oil, and since then, cooking has been part of my DNA. The examiner is not there to assess the truth of whatever you say. Nobody is going to fact check you in the IELTS. What they are most interested with is how do you express yourself? How do you communicate your ideas? That is the key thing that the examiner is there to do. So if my response sounds funny or if my response sounds outlandish, you do not need to be worried about that. What you need to be worried about is, does it connect logically? Is it a coherent answer? Is it relevant to the question that has been asked? If it ticks all these boxes, then you're fine and you should be confident that you can get a band 9 with such an answer. The next thing that you want to focus on when you are dealing with the speaking part 1, with the part 1 of the speaking test, is exhausting all the possibilities. Now, this is a very challenging part for most candidates who take the test. There are so many areas in English language that could come up. There's so many aspects of natural communication that could pop up in your speaking test. How do you prepare effectively to cover all these areas? This is a challenge that most test takers have. But I can tell you for a fact that what you should do or what you can do is to simply consult the official materials recommended by the Cambridge University Press or by the IDP Australia. These materials have a compilation of all the tests that has been taken since when the IELTS started, and you can easily go through them and have a feel of the areas that are usually tested in the speaking part 1. You have topics like family, your hometown, preferences, hobbies, art, music, sports. All these are areas that naturally everybody should be able to have a conversation or hold a conversation on them. What you need to do, like I said earlier, is to consult the official recommended IELTS practice guides. And when you do that, when you go to a particular page where you have a list of all the topics that you might get in speaking part 1, check them. If your reaction when you see a topic is to freeze for the first 7 seconds, when I say freeze for the first 7 seconds, it means that you do not have anything to say. Nothing comes to your mind when you see a topic. For example, you see a topic like newspapers, and the first thing that comes to your mind is, I do not have anything to say. Then you know that this is an area where you need to maybe do a couple of practice conversations with someone who uses English at a very, very high level. I'll repeat this again. Later on in the video, I will display a list of topics that are usually assessed in the part 1 of the speaking test, and I would implore you to please pause the video when you get to this part, look at these topics, and identify the ones that give you a 7 seconds pause before you answer the questions. These are the areas where you need to show up your strengths in. Another thing that you need to be very careful about when you're exhausting all the possibilities for the IELTS is the what's your favorite? What's your favorite is a question type that is often used in the part 1 of the speaking test. It's simply asking you for a preference in a specific area or about a specific idea. The first mistake that most test takers make when they get this question is to respond this way. My most favorite is... There's a grammar error in that response. The word favorite automatically shows that this is the most. This is the one thing that you like the most. So saying my most favorite automatically tells the examiner that you are not competent enough in the grammatical aspect of speaking. What you want to say is my favorite sport is football because it's a sport that keeps me fit. I'll repeat that response. My favorite sport is football because it's a sport that keeps me fit. This answer effectively closes the communication loop for that question. I've given my preference and I've also given a reason why I've chosen that preference. This is how you should answer in the IELTS, most especially the part 1 of the speaking test. The next thing that you want to be very careful about is expressing personal experience. When you say expressing personal experience, questions that would come up in the IELTS would be, did you like drawing when you were a child? Do you like singing now? Did you like playing football when you were a child? Do you have friends who you have known since when you were a child, and do you still talk to them now? All these questions are questions that dwell on your personal experience. The most important thing that you need to note when you're talking about personal experience is the tense that you will use. The tense used when recounting or giving an account of your personal experience is the past tense. Under no circumstance should you use the present tense, the future tense, or any other aspect of verbs when expressing personal experience. You also want to be very careful that when you're talking about your personal experience, you talk about things that you have truly experienced. This brings us to the next tip. And the next tip is called truth versus fiction. A lot of the candidates that I have trained for the IELTS or that I have tutored for the IELTS, which number in the thousands, ask me this question. Is it preferable to say the truth in the IELTS, or can I cook up stories? My first advice is this. When you're talking about something that you have truly experienced, chances are that you would make less mistakes. Chances are that you would be much more coherent when talking about it. Chances also are that you will feel more comfortable when expressing yourself if you're saying the truth. But there's no guarantee that you would have experienced all the questions or all the experiences that would come up in the IELTS. So what do you do in a situation where a question is thrown at you and you've never had that experience before? You can resort to fiction. You can confidently lie in the IELTS. And please mark the word I use. Confidently lie in the IELTS. A classic example of this question is this. Describe your hometown. Now, most people fall into the trap of believing that your hometown is basically where they were born or where the parents came from. What happens if your hometown is somewhere you've not been to in the last 10 years or the last 15 years? How do you recall enough details about your hometown to give a coherent answer that would flow effortlessly? This is a challenge. What do you do when you're stuck in this pitfall? You simply look for the most convenient place that you can remember. Most times, it's the place where you stay. I'll give you an example. Lanre, describe your hometown. My hometown is a place called Lekki in Lagos, Nigeria. It's located in the city center and it's easily accessible throughout anywhere that you're coming from in Lagos State. It's a serene environment that has a lot of tree-lined avenues, and you can always get to meet people who are very, very interesting when you stay in Lekki. Now, this answer might not be the model answer, but what I have done is to draw on my experience as someone who stays in Lekki and use that to answer the question about my hometown. Remember, no one is going to fact check you in the IELTS. The examiner is not concerned about the veracity of your facts. What they are concerned about is how well you can express those facts, how well you can express those things that you have in your mind. So, if the examiner asks you, where are you from? And you say, my name is Lanre, I'm from Anambra. And the next question that follows that is describe your hometown. And your hometown is somewhere that is not in Anambra. Do not be scared. Do not be concerned. This has no bearing on the scores that you're going to get for the speaking test. I'll repeat this again. If the examiner asks you a question that preempts a question that you're going to lie about, do not go back to correct the lie that you've given. Do not go back. Do not be worried about the lie that you're given, because it doesn't have any effect on the score that you're going to get for that part in the speaking test. What the examiner is much more concerned about is how well you express yourself when you are delivering that answer. Finally, you want to use the appropriate grammar when dealing with the speaking part 1. What do I mean by appropriate grammar? Contractions must definitely be used. Contractions like what? Don't, am, names. All these contractions are contractions that will definitely come up within the first 5 minutes or 3 minutes of the speaking part 1. endeavor to use them as they display a high level of pronunciation competence in the IELTS. Another grammar tip that you want to be concerned about or you want to note is this. When you're talking about personal experiences, always respond in the past tense. Your experience is something that you have been through or something that you have gone through before. The word before there shows that the time frame is something that has happened way back. So you cannot answer a personal experience question using the present tense or using the future tense. This will automatically drop your scores for grammar in the speaking part of the IELTS. In conclusion, you should be very careful about the type of grammatical expressions that you use in the part 1 of the speaking test. 3 tips are important when it comes to grammar for the part 1 of the speaking test. The first is contractions. You must use contractions to display a high level of pronunciation competence in English language. Words like names, don't, am are very essential to improving your score in the speaking part 1 of the IELTS test. A native English speaker would never say, my name is, would never say, I am, would never say, I do not. These do not occur in natural conversation, so you should avoid them as much as possible when you are responding to questions in the part 1 of the speaking test. The second grammar tip that you want to be careful about is the use of past tense when talking about personal experiences. An experience is something that has happened to you, and the time frame for an experience is usually the past. Under no circumstance should you respond to a personal experience question using the present tense or the future tense. This will significantly reduce your scores for the speaking test. The last thing that you want to be careful about when you're responding to questions in the part 1 of the speaking test as it relates to grammar is this. The examiner is going to lay some traps on your path, and you should be very careful not to fall into those traps. Traps like, what's your favorite? The non-native speaker of language would say, my most favorite is. The word most favorite or the phrase most favorite is wrong. It is not grammatically correct, and you should not use it in English language. The word favorite automatically shows that this is the most important thing to you. So you do not need to repeat that as it's a redundancy when you say my most favorite is or my most favorite things are. The IELTS test is a test of communication. It is not a test of truth. It is not a test of intelligence. It is a test of communication. What has been tested in the speaking test is how well you can express yourself, your fluency, your coherence. How relevant are your answers? How relevant are the things that you're saying to answering the questions that you've been asked? Your pronunciation, how you articulate your words, how you articulate your expressions are very, very important things that are assessed in the IELTS. Not the quality of your ideas, not the veracity of your ideas, nor the intelligence of your ideas. Put these tips that I've given you into action, and I can assure you that you will move from a band 7 or a band 6 where you are stuck to an instant band 9.